Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Clean Coalition called Powering Workplace EV Adoption. Today, we will be hearing from Brandon Oldham, a Senior Project Manager at CalSTART, who will be telling us all about the Charge at Work program. And my name is Haley Weinstein. I'm a Communications Lead at the Clean Coalition. Just a few housekeeping items before we get into today's content. The webinar recording and slides will be sent to all registered attendees within 2 business days. All webinars are archived on clean-coalition.org under events. If you have any questions at all during this webinar at any time, please feel free to ask them using the question panel on the right side of your screen, and we will get to them at the Q&A portion at the end. If you have any other questions about the Clean Coalition or anything else, please feel free to contact me. That's Haley, H-A-L-E-Y, at clean-coalition.org. The Clean Coalition is a nonprofit with the mission to accelerate the transition to renewable energy in a modern grid through technical, policy, and project development expertise. Our renewable energy endgame is to rely on 100% renewable energy, with at least 25% of that being local, interconnected within the distribution grid where people live and work, and ensuring resilience without dependence on the transmission grid. One important aspect of the Clean Coalition's mission is electrification and electric vehicles. On average, EVs emit as little as a 93 mile per gallon gas car, which is unheard of. However, the time of day that people charge is also extremely important, and being thoughtful about when we charge helps maximize the climate benefits of EVs and can reduce ratepayer costs. We'll get into the how. Let's take a look at this very simple duck chart on the right side of your screen. This is a common chart used to depict demand on California's electricity grid. The top line depicted here as customer demand is the total demand on the grid, whereas the green line is the net demand, which is total demand minus generation from renewable sources, predominantly solar. California's grid is cleanest between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. when solar generation peaks and renewable resources are abundant. As the solar generation drops in the late afternoon, natural gas plants ramp up to accommodate the rising demand. These natural gas plants emit greenhouse gases that drive climate change, and they release air pollutants that harm human health, usually in disadvantaged communities where many of these plants are located. One solution to flattening California's duck curve is utilizing local solar paired with storage. But unfortunately, today the grid still relies heavily on natural gas. If you would like to learn more about flattening California's duck curve with local solar, there is an article linked right here that you can access when you get the slides after today's webinar. Charging EVs in the evening adds to this peak demand, which increases grid stress and fossil fuel use. And this drives up electricity costs and contributes to expensive transmission upgrades, which are costs that are ultimately paid by the ratepayers. Charging EVs midday when the sun is shining and solar is abundant utilizes cleaner energy, eases grid stress, and reduces the need for costly transmission upgrades. If you want to learn more about the importance of robust daytime EV charging, there's another article from the Clean Coalition linked here. Most drivers, however, are not home between these peak sun hours of 10 and 2 when renewable energy is plentiful. Therefore, workplace chargers are a key to shifting charging behavior toward cleaner midday hours. To learn more about the Charge at Work program, which aims to increase workplace charging, we'll be hearing from Brandon Oldham. The Charge at Work program, funded by the U.S. Department of Energy and led by CalSTART, has supported thousands of employers across the country in planning and deploying EV charging infrastructure at workplaces. From small businesses to major national brands, the program has helped streamline the process, lower costs through incentives, and build momentum for clean transportation in real communities. Today's webinar will explore what Charge at Work has learned through that work, the tools and funding pathways available to support projects, and what comes next for the growing Charge at Work network. We will be hearing from Brandon Oldham, a senior project manager at CalSTART who is leading the Charge at Work initiative to expand workplace EV charging across the US. With over 7 years in e-mobility, he brings expertise in charging infrastructure, utility planning, and resilient energy solutions. Previously, Brandon supported national deployment projects with Electrify America at Shell Recharge Solutions. He holds a bachelor's in environmental science from the University of San Francisco and a master's in energy regulation and law from Vermont Law School. Therefore, without further ado, I will change the presenter to Brandon to hear all about Charge at Work.
Thank you, Haley. Really appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to share about Charge at Work. Yeah, give me a second. Let me pull up my slides. All right. Well, everyone, really appreciate the opportunity to share the work that feel honored as well to represent really a collaboration, as you'll learn, that is broad in scope, actually national, and the work that Charge at Work has done actually represents a number of companies as well as a great team here at CalSTART that's learned a lot over the past 3 years through this funding round with the Department of Energy, and really excited to be able to share what we've learned and where we're going, and then answer any questions at the end. So just an overview of today's presentation. We're going to talk about why workplace charging, what is Charge at Work. That's going to be everything from what it's been, where it is now, and where we want to go, which specifically ties into how we can work together on this, or any questions or projects that folks might actually have deployed or seek to deploy in the future. And then I want to give a demonstration and end with a Q&A. So as the presentation proceeds, please feel free, if any questions come up or if you've already got them, get them in early and then we can queue them up for discussion at the end. So why workplace charging? Haley gave some great overviews of how workplace charging can help regarding the grid, but also diving into some numbers about current EV owners. 74% have expressed strong interest in workplace charging, and 60% of EV drivers need chargers at work, either because of long commutes or no access to at-home charging. In fact, nearly, depending on the numbers and growth trends over the next few years, somewhere between 20 to 40%, and in urban locations, that does skew towards the higher percentages of drivers who have no charging access at home, either due to multifamily residence, which even if you could deploy chargers per every spot, there's often not enough spots for as many residents, so you're spilling into curbside charging needs, and just in hyper-urban centers, street parking, whatever that looks like. Where the hypothesis of workplace charging also ties into EV adoption. So broadly speaking, nationally, we've been able to reach 10% adoption of EVs across the nation. In hyper markets like California, even Colorado recently having passed some California on some per quarter growths, you're starting to see EV adoption get that 25% adoption rate. So we're definitely at this point, which is often called the chasm, where you shift from early adopters to early majority, and that is the scale that you want to get to for mainstream adoption of a new technology. It's really exciting that we're here in the industry. There's been tons of work even before I've been in this work, building off of decades of thinking of the GM EV1 and the work ever since electric vehicles first came out back in the 1900s. So it's really exciting to see this market adoption. But the thesis of change and the hypothesis of why Charge at Work started was that to really help accelerate that adoption, if you can address charging at the workplace, there's a number of multiple value streams that you can stack, like how he was mentioning with the grid benefits, but also just solving that percentage of the population who may be interested in adopting EVs, but doesn't have a place to reliably charge at home, can get that reliably charging at work, and it can reduce range anxiety, and just that's the thesis of change. And so excited to talk more about what we've observed, what the challenges are, how do you address those challenges, what challenges still exist to ultimately drive EV adoption, deploy chargers at the workplace, and benefit clean air. This one I can speak to rather quickly, but another aspect of the thesis is that EV charging, if there is a behavior change, one of the challenges of EV adoption tied to EV charging, many times people talk about the chicken and the egg, where it's like, which one comes first? And for the longest time in the industry, there was this question of like, we need more EV models, we need more EV for people to adopt. Well, I'd largely say the automakers and OEMs have met that threshold, and we definitely see a challenge within the charging space. Now that you've gotten to a scale of 25% plus in some markets, you start to see the strain of chargers out there. So if you have charging where people live, work, and play, which play can be when you're en route, going somewhere on a weekend, or wanting to charge either at a destination that you go to that's not where you live and work, or in transit, um, being able to provide charging in these three categories is likely going to be pretty much all you need. But there is a behavior shift and a learning curve where that charging, or you may call it like refueling, you're still adding electricity as the fuel source, but for first time EV adopters still, it's a new way to fuel a car. So it's not the traditional pull into a gas station. So that learning curve is a little bit of the reason we see EV adoption stall. Some more reasons, want to just kind of provide, as I speak to some of our strategies that we've deployed and things we've learned over the past 3 years. We analyzed some of the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and to really understand, like, okay, if we're talking about where people work and deploying charges at workplaces, it's really important to understand which industry and workplace verticals you want to target. So this, to summarize what you're seeing here, this is going to add up to showing what is almost 57% of the US workforce, and then it's broken out from top to bottom, which the largest percentage of the workforce and where they work across industry, and then what type of building type that is. So you've got a professional in business services representing 13% of the workforce. Those are your standard office buildings. You've got healthcare and social assistance actually being hospitals, a major area. One thing in the past 3 years of this program made me actually realize every time I pass a hospital, the actual property percentage that's allocated to parking. So not only for staff, but then visitors to hospitals. State and local governments, so schools are a big one actually. State and local government being universities, it can be anything from unified school districts, from elementary through to higher ed, high school, or higher ed undergrads, public schools there. I would throw in private schools as well here, which even though it's not state and local government exactly, schools and universities are a big percentage of the workforce. And even though students may not be in the workforce at that time while they're at school, they usually have a second job, but if school is their primary destination, or sometimes they're living on campus, students can be categorized as folks who are showing up to a workplace or a place where they're at. And if they're having EVs, providing charging for not only staff, but students at the university or the schools is helpful. And then just bottoming out 10%, almost 10%, and then 8%, you've got retail and leisure and hospitality. One of the strategies, and you'll see in our outreach, is we've really focused on those top three. So we're targeting greater than 35%, almost 40% of the workforce by focusing on office buildings, hospitals, and schools. Shopping centers and hotels, the use case, what I was referencing with the behavior change and how you charge there, definitely valuable. A lot of people working in those two industries, but the type of charging you would do isn't always mirrored. Shopping centers, you're not always there for 8 hours. Workplaces, you're there for 8 hours. Hotels, definitely the staff can be there, but the hotel thinking has tended to be offering charging for visitors. So as a way to promote certain clientels visiting those hotels, and then it's a different use case. It's more like home charging, you can think of it, even though it can actually be workplace charging. So office buildings, hospitals, and schools. One aspect of charger work that we learned we had to define as we started this journey 3 years ago is, breaking it down into the basics of what is the distinguishing between charging at work and workplace charging. Being the same thing, but so what do we mean by charger work? We determined that through charger work, want to help employers or employees who are those internal champions who first one showing up to the workplace with an EV and now wanting to utilize that time at work, 8+ hours, to charge it, maybe because they don't have a place to charge at home, or that range, maybe their commute is longer than the average, and for those weekend trips they want to go somewhere after work and they want to be able to have that range. So we've defined workplace charging largely as employers offering level 1 or level 2 charging, not typically DC fast chargers, for employees who are showing up to the workplace with their personal electric vehicles. The reason why we had to fine tune that is when we first started and we're going out to the market, this was definitely a market thesis. It was understanding what are the drivers in the market that could help incentivize EV adoption through charging solutions at the workplace. And early on in the first year and a half, the question was always coming up, like, what about administration vehicles? So it can be a large employer that has multiple admin vehicles as their use case, and they either offer those vehicles for employees during the nature of their work. They might have routes. So then it was the discussion of like admin vehicles, fleet vehicles, what really is workplace charging. And just to distinguish, because there's a lot of value being offered in the marketplace, we always, as CalStart, which is a nonprofit leading this organization, this work at Charge at Work, we wanted to be able to meet the market where we can provide the most value. We felt there's a lot of great entities and partners already providing fleet-based solutions, so we're always happy to advocate for them. But where we wanted to jump into the market and accelerate the deployment of EV charging infrastructure, to accelerate EV adoption, is those employers who really need that assistance. Like, what does it look like to deploy for the first time, or to grow a deployment from 10 years ago, 5 or 10 years ago? What do you do? Like, what do we do with chargers we might have had? How do we scale it? We're meeting capacity, but we want more chargers because more employees showed up with EVs. All these different use cases that we found out over the years, and it was fun distinguishing what that definition actually meant and being able to provide that value to the market. I really love what Haley touched on. When you get the slides, feel free to click this link to the study, but this kind of builds off of the work that the Clean Coalition was talking about. And when you charge at the workplace, due to the deployment of solar, which oftentimes now can be backed with storage, you're actually providing stacked value where you're definitely charging your car, but you tend to, even if the grid doesn't have, like, that workplace doesn't have solar, due to, if that regional area has deployed solar, whether it's on the distribution grid or backed up on site, you're able to charge effectively from the sun. So you're being able to utilize excess solar capacity that might be being generated during peak solar generation, and that's going to cut costs. It's going to improve grid efficiency. The grid wants that solar capacity, when it's being peak generated, to be consumed, and so it's actually more cars charging at that time, makes the utilities happy, makes the environment happy, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and actually then will enable wider build out and reliance on renewable generation. If we meet that demand, we can deploy more solar to support such demand on the grid. So I really will, there's many aspects of Charge at Work. I want to focus on what we learned throughout the past 3 years and where we specifically provide value in the market, and where we're going from our learnings from the DOE period. I may not touch on anything, so if anything like piques your curiosity, please like bookmark it, flag a question. I'm trying to also go slow so folks can absorb any aspect that they might like, and we can dive into that deeper during Q&A or even after following up with our team. But Charge at Work is really a plethora of engagements, and in this wheel on the website, I'll walk through what our process looks like. So essentially, first, we want to provide learning opportunities. We want to provide a resource hub where wherever you're at in that journey, maybe you're that employer deploying infrastructure for the first time, you're an employer who's scaling a previous deployment, maybe you have some outdated equipment that you want to revamp and you want to take this opportunity to do it right. or better, because maybe over the past 5-10 years, more employees have shown up with EVs, or because of HR initiative internally, the company has decided that this is an incentive, and we're going to try to drive, just like sometimes employers offer different healthcare, fitness incentives, different environmental incentives that tie with ESG goals from the company and carbon emission reduction goals. So cataloging that, being able to understand charging habits, and taking whichever lead that employer wants to take. So first of all, it can be a learning hub. Then we want to engage wherever you're at. So understanding the market demand, we have a pledge, which is really meant to, it's a non-binding commitment to see what the market demand is for different verticals. Okay, are employers across the nation raising their hand and saying, we're committed to deploying chargers, and this is what that looks like for us. Level 2s, level 1s, or just meeting our employees' needs, or meeting our employees' needs with whatever capacity we can meet them at. Like, we may not be able to upgrade our capacity, but we want to do what we can. Whatever that pledge looks like, but a commitment to infrastructure. Or it looks like a commitment to creating a discussion group within depending on the size of the employer, just supporting the employees' goals of wanting to adopt EV transportation and understanding the resources that employer can share, like the resources at chargerwork.com. So just getting a feedback of what the market and employers across the market are actually wanting to do in this space. Now, for those employers who want to actually build out projects, and that is deploying infrastructure at their place of work for employees, we can actually help them plan. And we have a project builder, which I'm going to demo, which is our main value that we add. So how do we provide employers with all the information they need to build out, understand the financing, CapEx, OpEx of what a project like this looks like, and at the end of the day, being able to celebrate if there's great case studies, getting that recognition on the website. As I mentioned earlier, ChargerWork is a group of companies who are able to have a national outreach. It's not just CalSTART alone, but Clean Coalition, PEC, Q-Merit, National Grid, Fourth, EV Noir, Climate Group, a number of Clean City Initiative partners across the nation. That's really been how we can reach different employers at their locale, given the different needs of each state, each city or municipality. And I actually this slide mentions, I mentioned what our project builder is, and I'm going to give a demo at the end, but the ChargerWork project builder is the main value we've been able to provide to the market. So there's a tool where users can create an account, and you can create multiple projects. Say you want to almost replicate a deployment you have and see what that looks like nowadays, or play with different pricing mechanisms to understand, hey, we've been offering this charging for free. What does it look like if we actually add a percentage adder to the kilowatt hours that we're charging to recoup some cost? Or you've had chargers deployed and you, for different reasons, it could be ESG goals or many employees showing up with EVs or wanting to support EV adoption, wanting to deploy more chargers, or for the first time deploying chargers and just needing to understand before you go to market, get a competitive bid, call an installation company or even a charging provider company, what does this even look like? Ballpark number, what is this something that manager inside who's tasked with this, usually a facilities or sustainability manager, sometimes HR departments offering it as incentives, but when that person is tasked with having to scope out how to build a deployment of EV charging at the workplace, this is a great first place to start. It's going to show you basically a wizard that guides you through setting up a project, dialing in some questions like how much do you want to charge, and then once you give it some initial variables, you can fine tune those variables afterwards and understand how that impacts the payback period, different CapEx and long-term OpEx. Which I'm going to give a demo after this next few slides. The website is the main hub, but we also provide guides. So if there's employees or employers that want guides, employees being those internal advocates that if you're an employee having an EV at the workplace, you've wanted to champion this internally, reach out to us. We'd love to connect with you, understand what your needs are. and meet your employer, and then basically provide them with the resources and knowledge to hopefully empower them and empower you to deploy charging at the workplace. And so I'm going to jump into the demo. I'll show you our website, which on our website, I'll show you what it looks like to join our program, create a project, and support workplace charging. And then very excited to end with a discussion and hopefully connecting with our team. If you go to chargework.com.org, at being spelled out AT, chargework.org, the web page is going to show you a number of resources here at the top. There's different links that can route you to different places. The key ones to help connect with our team, if this is of any interest or value, is definitely the pledge form and then the project builder. So the site's going to have a number of different facts and figures that I've gone through, some overviews of what we've been, without even having to reach out to us or create an account. There's examples that you can go through to see what a project builder output looks like. You can view different incentives, signing the pledge, seeing different businesses that have partnered with us. Some big ones that have partnered with us over the years that also are in this space: Siemens, Prologis, a number Paycheck Solutions, just a number of companies who thank you for signing the pledge, signaling your support, and helping us over the past 3 years understand what the market needs and what the market is preferring to do. Like, what does deployment look like? Level 1, level 2, and just a number of governmental and state agencies and universities that have helped us over the past 3 years. Signing the pledge, what is that? You can, as a workplace or public official, if you're wanting to understand how to connect with us, fill out the form, let us know, and then we'll reach out. Also, a number of resources that we mentioned, depending on what you're kind of looking for. There's a large library here that's interactive, depending on what you're looking for. But I want to jump into the project builder, and then just a reminder to queue up any questions, and I'm happy to dive into more specifics. I'm already logged in, but if you're not logged in and you want to see what a project builder output looks like, which you're going to see through this, you can always preview that again by clicking the project builder, and you'll see like a preview. But what we're about to do is go through and give some details about an example organization, share some assumptions about chargers, and then see what the output looks like. So I'm going to start a new project, and this is going to be test. What you'd want to do here is different various types. There's nothing wrong you can put in here if you're really like unsure. There's nothing crazy wrong. Typically, you're a medium or large business. A zip code is helpful if anyone has certain zip codes that they'd like to throw in or even test. Sometimes employers have different places of work across the nation. You can create multiple projects for different office buildings. The one that's really important here, because this is what builds into some of the financial models, is the project number of years of operation. And there's usually helpful guides here where it's actually referring to the lifetime of the project. This is important because it's not like how long is this going to take to build out. It's understanding the assumptions of if is this infrastructure lasting and expected to be operational for 10, 15, 20 years, which we're seeing, depending which operations and maintenance packages are definitely recommended, because you could get this infrastructure to last 15 years. If you don't maintain it, certain fans and fuses, and just depending on which environments you're in, depending on cold weather, snow, rain, you can see assets being beyond their usable life, like in as short as 5 years. So that's those some details and examples that we like to provide and scope out. So like financially, I'd recommend a 15-year operation, assuming that you know when you deploy this and you're investing in this, that this equipment that you're aiming to deploy lasts for 15 years. Say we're starting this year, but you don't know what time. You can either put a date into the future, and if you have no chargers on site today, or even if you have some, but you know you're going to pull those out, put 0. But if you have some that you're adding, just put the number that you're adding. So if you have none today and you're 150 employers, those are some of the first variables you want to put in. And then it's going to ask about charging needs. you can go back in and play with these and see the different outputs even after you've done this wizard. So, but you can also create multiple projects. If you know how many ports you need, maybe because you've had someone come out to your site previously and you know your capacity, or you know how many folks are showing up with EVs and you know that exact number, feel free to put that in here. Now, if you just know how many vehicles need charging, but you're not sure how many ports you need, feel free to put how many employees are showing up with vehicles. Sometimes you're also just limited on parking spots. So I can't put more than this. I've got 5 spots that I know I can dedicate. That can also be tied to charging ports if you've done some capacity. However you want to put in these variables, you can kind of go about it a number of different ways. That is one of the things that our team can help you with. So we always recommend diving into it, playing with the project builder, building a project as best you can with some assumptions, or if you've had previous site assessments, scoping it out. And it's always better than to send that to us, let us know you filled it out. We can take a look at it on our back end before having a meeting, but then we could set up a meeting, dive into details, fine tune it. And then one of the nice things about Charger Work is we can connect you to some of our implementation partners for a free site assessment. They've already now been briefed on what you're aiming for as a scope. We can have a preliminary introduction call and basically set up a site assessment that's informed before anyone's deployed to the site of what you're aiming for, maybe where you've been, and I'll show you what that looks like once we're through here. So say you do have 10 total parking spots, and there are some assumptions in here based off of how many ports might grow into the future. But ideally, if you're not sharing charger ports, let's see what this looks like. And I'm going to keep it to the generic charger. There is a number of options in here. You can select level 1, level 2, level 3. Depending on power output, different models will show up. And I'm just going to keep it generic for now. There's a backend database. If you know pricing, like if you've already gotten a quote, you can even put in your own information or jump into the catalog and find a charger that you know you already prefer. I'm going to add an adder here. This pulls based off the zip code information you put in a typical pricing. If you know your commercial rate, you can enter it into the project builder. But also, I'm going to add an adder that is 50%. Say we're marking up the price of electricity because you do want to charge employees, you're offering a benefit, but you want to add 50% to this, and that's going to show us something in the financials. Again, this information you may not know without a site assessment. To make it typically fall in line, I'm going to say you don't need a panel upgrade. We're trying to fit with electrical capacity on site, and we want that conduit run to be as short as possible, typically staying under 50 feet. We'll see if that's doable, but these are some of those fine-tuned variables that we would hone in on after about a site walk or site visit. So now, if you've registered, done that, what you can see is very quick cap OpEx output of you're looking at about a 52,000 CapEx investment upfront to be able to deploy over the lifetime 8 chargers on site. And operationally, what you want to look at is this is going to cost about $1,800 over that project period of 15 years. Now, the variable that I added, that 50% adder, shows up here as a negative of charging revenue. So over that lifetime, you're generating some revenue to offset those front CapEx costs, and that's why I chose 50%. So that means like, okay, businesses, they would actually want to understand. They don't want it to be a black box of costs. Oftentimes I feel like what we've learned is the market actually has stalled. I would say a thesis, and one of the hypotheses that's been tested is there's so many players in the space, so many players that have left, both on the software side, on the hardware side, that has created uncertainty in the market. And so it's also created hesitation from employers wanting to adopt EV charging because they just don't have all the information and tools they need. And that's where Charger Work wants to answer all those questions, provide that information free of charge, and connect you with folks who can come once you've understood what the costs are. Now you can actually plan it, roll it up to decision makers, forecast it on future fiscal years, and have all the information to actually deploy this over the lifetime at the workplace. One of the things I actually wanted to point out is I realized as I was speaking, I was on the 1-year view, and actually if you click lifetime, that's going to show you across the 15-year. There are some assumptions built in here based off how many vehicles you said and EV efficiency, average vehicle miles per day. So as you dial that in with your workforce, you'll then understand the usage and then OpEx, showing that 52,000 upfront, over 15 years costs an additional 27,000. But at any time, if you want to start over, if you want to actually say you get on different time of use rate, which is another fine-tune mechanism, adjust the costs or even edit some assumptions that you built into here. So say you do want to add a markup of 100%, which you're still talking 50 cents a kilowatt hour, and you update that charger set over the lifetime. Now you're speaking of generating up to $250,000 over 15 years based off of the assumptions of how many kilowatt hours you're going to be charging from employees' EVs and how much of that adder you put onto that. So all of a sudden you're able to start without even having to call up an installer and deal with what is, they're having to focus on truck rolls, costs, everything on their end without getting to this point. We're kind of front loading that work for them. We're able to understand your project. We can connect you with them. And then when they now come to your site, they know what you're looking for. They know a scope. And sometimes what we've seen in the market is that's some of the reasons why you call up one installer, they might give you a different answer. And it is hard to dial in based off your specific use cases, what a price would be. So sometimes you may have called someone, gotten a figure of like, oh, it's going to cost 100,000 plus. That was just a rough guess. Now able to dial it in, know the cap and OpEx of that opportunity. Now say that $50,000 up front is still a gut punch. Financially, it's a hard ask to roll up. It might not be dependent on the size of companies, but also say you're a smaller business that still wants to support employees, and that's kind of big. $50,000 CapEx year one. You can definitely finance it. So what does it look like if you finance that with certain assumptions, discount rates, down payments, understanding what those models would look like over the course of that loan. Now, typically you'd want to make sure that to pay down at a certain interest rate, talk to your accounting, understand how you can leverage that with tax deductions, certain revenue. So sometimes costs are good. If you had a great year, revenue and profits are up, and now $50,000 cost on the books can offset some of that. That's not tax advice. That's just something businesses can think about when absorbing a cost up front. Then, of course, incentives are very hyper to different locales and jurisdictions. This will be tied to the zip code of the location. And we err on the side of offering more. So this is not saying all of these incentives would match, and we're okay erring on the side of giving more that may not match. So we don't mean to cause confusion, but we do want folks to explore, like, okay, do you want to consider, now that you've deployed infrastructure, a rate structure that's different? So this number is going to be different from what you've been used to as an employer, which may be savings. Are there certain state grants that are offering money for ports deployed? Are there tax incentives? We've tended to seen over the past 6 months different incentives federally removed, but those may come back in the future. They may not. States, counties, utilities, we tend to see like the private market having to offer whatever they want to offer. But last thing, and then I want to open up to questions, is if you wanted to dive into what those charging revenue models look like, you can go in here, understand, I built one set of chargers, which is right here. This is that. Say in the future you want to add more, you can always add another charger set. That's what we can help fine tune. Like say you're an employer and you're understanding like, okay, well, I have 2 campuses. I don't want to build 2 projects. I just want to see all the financials in one place. That's why you might add a charger set to a project you've already built. Now, some companies, they may already have internal project management software. Some may not. This actually ends up being what I'd say a construction or civil project management project that a workplace has to understand how to deploy. And now there's turnkey solution providers in the market that will coach you through that, but we also want to front end that expectation and education to, hey, you're about to go on a 6 to 12 month journey. What time of year, depending on if you're in winter climates, or can you actually build this out? And what's your conduit run look like? Is it going to pass through the parking lot? So now you're going to have a trench in the parking lot. How do you educate your employees on that? We can take some of that burden off. So it's not so much the employer having to figure out everything you need to plan for. And this is a rough process project management tool where you can actually understand, okay, we're doing a charger work analysis. filled out the interest form, had an intro call with us, and then getting a site assessment. Now, during that site assessment, photos, documents can be uploaded, site designs if you already have pre-built single lines, schematics of the parking lot, engineering documents. Sometimes what we see is employers have done a solar deployment maybe 5 years ago, and so they do actually have single line diagrams of electrical diagrams from that. Like, so that's, if you've done a solar project or any electrical work, pull up those files, put them here. This is a two-way stream, so if you give us permission, we can then see what this and help you track this project and hand it over to anyone that you want to move forward with. The dates here are based off that initial date. So when you said, hey, if you already know some money that you have in a future fiscal year that you can allocate, you can use this as a project guide to help you plan this project. And then you can see all your uploads in one spot if you click uploads. So I tend to hear that that's a lot of information. I'll pause now. Thank you so much. If you've stuck with us through all that, I'm happy to pause. Any aspect that sounded interesting, I'm an open book. Please let me know what I can help answer from there. But thank you so much. We're very proud of Charge at Work. Where we're going is we're wanting to offer those employers that want to deploy infrastructure to their employees. It can be fleets down the road as well. It doesn't have to just be that. So depending on your specific use case, if you're wanting to support employees, educate employees, build out incentives to support this type of growth, deploy actual infrastructure, reach out to us. You can find our newsletter updates here, pledge form, and reach out to our team. So with that, Haley, I'll hand it back to you or Greg for questions, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandon. We do have a couple of questions here from Jose Torre Bueno, the Executive Director at the Center for Community Energy. His first question is about bidirectional charging. He asks, if EVs are bidirectionally charging at work, will this allow owners to bring low-cost electricity home if they have bidirectional chargers at home and use some of the electricity to power their homes during the peak of the duck curve? Is this concept part of Charge at Work yet?
That is an amazing question. It's very rare. I know I don't know what your journey is, but I can tell by that question you've thought a lot about this. We would love to just have a call, like reach out to our team. Happy to set up a 10, 15, 30-minute call to learn more, first of all. But that question is so insightful that you're speaking to value stacks that we usually don't even get into with folks. So let me see if I'm summarizing that. But this is where we also let employers know, like, you can charge for your employees. It doesn't have to be free. You can charge it flat rate. You can just replace the cost of electricity, because it sometimes gets into this question of, well, what about my employees that don't have an electric vehicle? We tend to answer that by saying, like, well, hey, you usually offer fitness incentives, right? Well, not everyone takes advantage of that. For example, there's different CalSTART incentives where if we choose to participate and enroll, there's a company-wide, if you have like a Apple Watch and you're tracking your Fitbits, like, you can get certain points and benefits and free gift cards for doing that. You don't have to participate, but if you do, you chose to, and you get certain incentives. Literally free gift cards, money, Starbucks, money for walking and tracking that. And it's because of their systems, like their systems with workplace charging incentives, that employers want to support that for different ESG goals, roll up to their board, talk about carbon emission reductions, ISO certifications, which qualify for certain grants. Like, the reason why this scales up and employers are interested is a number of different reasons. This specific reason, really great. If you have bidirectional charging, which means you can take that charging, charge up your car, battery. Most cars these days now have an average of 300 miles of range, 70 to 100 kilowatt hour batteries. That is a lot, by the way. Most homes per day, you might, and it's highly unique, like, depends on your usage. If you're blasting AC or have a ton of electrical supply appliances and no solar, this, on average, you might be 6 to 10 kilowatt hours a day for standard 2 people home consumption. 1,000 square foot home, 2 to 3 people, 6 to 10 kilowatt hours a day. What's that? Oh, that then scales. So you're talking about a car. If you have a 100 kilowatt hour battery, you can support, let's just do 10. That's 10 days of say the power went out for 10 days, which is a pretty big blackout if that ever happens, you can have 10 days of backup if all of a sudden you're able to charge at work. Say your commute home is only 10 miles, average commutes are 30 miles across the nation, so let's just use the most. You have a 300-mile range car with a 100 kilowatt hour battery. You charge at work every day. You're now charging to work fully. You're leaving to work with an 80% full battery, like for battery health. It's okay not to charge to 100%. Now you have put in also, which largely came from solar, from the grid. You basically charge your car with the sun, can bring that power home, which maybe during that your employer's offering it for free, and at home if you've got a bidirectional panel. So think solar power, like Tesla Powerwall. A number of other charging companies have bidirectional built in. It also can be, if you have an electrician who already built it into your panel, it doesn't have to be a custom solution that's offered on the market. It can be a number of different ways it's implemented. But yeah, you effectively can take that free, if it was paid for by the employer, home, and now bring that, say you get home at 5 to 8 p.m. and it's peak rates, you're on a time of use rate where that's going to be 60 cents a kilowatt hour. You can actually, yes, deploy that into your home. You're now using your car's battery for that peak hour free. And let's do the quick math there. Say normally you would consume 30 kilowatt hours in 3 hours during peak, and that's being charged at 60 cents a kilowatt hour. Economically, over a month, you're saving 20 to hundreds of dollars, depending on your family size and house size. But we have not dived into that. That was an amazing question. I hope the way I explained it captured the intent, but that is a great question. Thank you.
That was a good question. I was not familiar with that concept, and it sounds like it should be utilized more. It sounds great.
Actually, the reason why I kind of feel like I just summarized what your question was, how do we represent that value, right? Like we can't, if you're the employer wanting to deploy it, we would love to explain that to the employer and say, hey, you're offering real value to your employees even when they take it home. So it's not just at the workplace. We've actually never gotten into those deep of discussions, and we've never factored in that financial modeling into the costs. It's more of just I think the Clean Coalition has different graphs. Like there's these unknown costs that when you deploy solar and storage, for example, because there's not sometimes regulatory frameworks for how do you capture that value, there is unaccounted value that by doing solutions like this, you're adding that are just, it's extra value that you add to a project like this. So it's like free value.
Good point. Good point. We do have another question, also from Jose. He asks, can I use this tool for hypothetical projects for policy research?
Please, this tool is free of charge. I do want to say, like, you might see our website change. Like the reason why this webinar is focused on where we're going is the DOE has funded this effort, and it was really a thesis, right? The thesis, which by the way, I can share some details, just to put some context of where we were actually when we first received the award and the announcement, right? The year was 2021, and then we applied. Remember what happened in 2020? Like, think about getting a federal national scope project talking about catalyzing workplace deployment, and pretty much you get this award a year after the whole world shifted the way they work. I don't know if everyone remembers, but I'm trying to like be callous. There's like, we all stopped working at workplaces, and I won't, like, that presented a real challenge. So every step of this way, the team and our partners had to tackle challenges that when we initially went after the funding, the thesis of change was like, hey, go out to the market, see what workplaces are doing. The DOE, before they announced this, like, to offer an award like this, they were thinking of it before 2020. So then when it's applied to and submitted and won, it was all before the world changed and the nature of going to work changed. But when this opportunity first existed, it was in that standard 9 to 5, 90% of folks are going to work. There's huge grid benefits, and ever since 2020, those thesis of changes are still out there. We also see a lot more folks having returned to the office, a hybrid approach. So you've got the work models are returning, but the whole intent of this was to get market data to understand how you can fine tune and what levers government can add incentives to make it more robust. I think the private sector has come to meet some of those answers. but it was very hard for us to adapt, and we shifted multiple times throughout these 3 years. I say all that because the point was to understand what the market wants. The thesis of change being if you deploy charges at the workplace, you can drive EV adoption, and then create a self-sustaining place to continue providing that value in the marketplace. So we're still fine-tuning what that looks like. We think we know the best way to start is keep things free. That's all to say, yes, the website, please use it. Please use the project builder, use it for policy research. Let us know if you know of an incentive, like say you're using it, you filled out a zip code and you're like, hey, actually my utility so-and-so has an incentive that your incentive database doesn't have. Like, please let us know. We can get that updated in time on our back end. And you might find things that, things are constantly changing. We're working on our back ends through CalSTAR and our partners on the policy front to help utilities deploy more incentives. And then as those happen, we want to get those in here. So that's all to say, please use the tool however you can, and let us know if you find anything that we can improve.
All right, thank you. We have a couple other questions. This one is from Esme Landeck. She is a member of the Clean Coalition. She asks, how long is this program anticipated to go on? Also, will the tools that are available be available after the initiative ends?
Great question. Yes, so after DOE funding, the point was to make a self-sustaining market-driven solution. So it was understand with a wide funnel. That's where we started with, like, we don't know what workplace storage is. What is it? So we went out to the market, went to universities, went to office buildings, heard all the different typical things that we were assumptions, but we want to test those assumptions. You have a hypothesis, assumptions, test those hypotheses, understand data that makes those hypotheses statistically significant or not, be able to roll that up. So what's to come, if everyone's like, where's this going? Teaser, within 90 to 120 days, we will be summarizing the final report. Please sign up for updates. We don't spam. We actually probably could send a lot more emails. Reach out to us directly if you want more information. But the quickest way to sign up for updates and understand our final report when that's sent out and the roll up of everything we've learned and where we're going after this, we're going to deliver within the next 90 to 120 days. But even after DOE funding ends, which is coming to an end, we want to work with those employers, understand their needs, connect them with solution providers, and basically still provide this value to the market. Do I know exactly what that looks like yet? I can say I know. What I wish it looks like is as much of this stays free as possible. We think the biggest value we can provide as a nonprofit, our first thesis that's been tested and our assumption now is there is a critical role that nonprofits can play to benefit the private sector, saving them costs, but also then building trust with employees who want to deploy this before they're introduced to a financial transaction, being highly informed and educated, so that when they make that decision with no pressure, no bias, agnostic to solution, actually meeting the needs of the client, being able to then connect them to someone when they're ready, or also just a number of different partners to fine tune that solution so that when they do deploy it, it's hyper accelerated, right? It's not iterated multiple times, and companies on the private sector can't always support that. And that's why, so we find a need. What might that look like? We might have a membership tier. I could see something like that, like, hey, we might have to put some of this behind a paywall. We might have to limit number of projects you can build where X number are free. None of that's all hypothetical right now. None of that is in the works. It really depends on how many people use our tool that we can provide that free value for. So please use our tool, connect with us. If you're interested in deploying infrastructure, we can fine tune that. And when you're ready, connect you with someone who can actually do that. And our services are free. There's no gotcha down the road. The one thing we'll do is connect you to someone who will at one point give you a quote and let you know this is what it would really look like. And when you're ready, let us know. I know we've got 5 minutes left, and are there more questions? And I'm happy to take some more questions, and I hope I'm happy to use as much time as we can for folks who want to stay on.
We have one more question right now, unless any come through while we address this one. This question is from Gopal Shankar, the president at Recult Energy, and they ask if Charge at Work is threatened or in any danger of being defunded, I guess due to the political situation.
Great question. I don't mind it. And I'm very happy to say, like, no, there's been no risk. Had there been a risk, like, we monitored it during the new administration change, and part of our thesis of change, other industry stakeholders have said this, and I believe it to be true. I want as many incentives as possible, not trying to make it a comparison, but the fossil fuel industry has gotten a plethora of incentives, good or bad, like they are what they are. And that's a behemoth where we're not going to try to attack them. Like, you can go that route, but like our hypothesis is if you provide value, the market will respond. And we believe we're providing high value. We believe by providing that value, not only in upfront cost, like being free upfront, reducing cost, not only because like we optimize your solution, that reduces cost, really fine tunes it, but it's going to reduce cost because if all of a sudden, if you'd gone into this unknown and you had to get competitive bids, what would have or could have been a 6-month fine-tuned, calibrated deployment, like civil construction engineering, electrical permits, I'd say 6 months is probably the best you can do. So just know that, like even that gut check, understanding some employers who'd be like, oh, I want to do this in next month. It's like, that's going to be more than that. But now being able to know that when you do deploy, being as efficient as possible, that saves everyone money. You can get it into a fiscal calendar. You can set metrics based off of certain goals you've got on the accounting side, certain initiatives you've tackled internally with HR. So we believe, first of all, simply put, no, the reason why we're still here is our funding hasn't been cut. We're running our project through, I don't mind sharing the details. The reason why too is this was funded, like I mentioned, thought of and conceived of and funded back in 2020, 2021. So thankfully, we were not impacted. I know a lot of programs were, but our project was more focused on outreach education and we're not offering like incentives ourselves. So that's a bit more of why we're not impacted. But also our project, it's running to completion. And now we're at that point where if we can offer that value to the market, I think it's incumbent on the automakers, the charging companies, then through adoption, those solutions bringing that value to the market that ultimately limits the need for incentives. Like this work shouldn't and can't continue where it's 100% incentive based. We want incentives as efficiently tuned as possible, but we've also got to drive down costs and bring value where value can be given to continue that growth, because we're right at that chasm, that scale where so many times we've been here in the market and it's either going to go one way or the other, and we think it's going to go the other way. Reason why, you have automakers investing billions in battery production in the US and across the world, vehicle production in the US and across the world, that they've already made those commitments. So even if incentives disappeared, like they don't want $8 billion sunk that they've already committed to. So there's certain things that are in motion that won't be easily undone for at least 10, 20, 30-year time horizons that we think there's a lot of market that we can provide to the industry.
Great. Do you have anything else to add, Brandon, before the end of the webinar? It looks like that was our last question.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. Those were great. Thank you for the opportunity. I really just want to thank all of our partners, the team at Charge at Work. It's an honor to be able to share this work. I'm really looking forward to our report. Stay tuned, sign up for updates. I can just share for the Charge at Work team, both all of our partners and internally, it's going to be a busy 3 to 6 months. So if you do reach out to us and there's a delay, please give us some grace and understanding, but please follow up if you're interested in like the final report. Best way is sign up for updates on the website. Please check out the project builder. It's free. Give us feedback. We can fine tune it. We can make it better. We've actually iterated multiple times throughout the past 3 years based off feedback. And yeah, thank you so much. If you're an employer or an employee that wants to learn more about EV charging, charging at the workplace, supporting home charging, we have solutions for all of those, because also through CalStart, which is a nonprofit mission driven to accelerate clean transportation through a number of verticals. And so even if you have questions unrelated to this, please feel free to reach out to not only CalStart, but Clean Coalition. And we can likely connect you with someone who can answer your questions if it's not us.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, please feel free to ask me any questions or the Clean Coalition. And the webinar recording and slides will be available for all attendees within 2 business days. So you will see that in your email and also on the Clean Coalition website. And with that being said, that concludes our webinar today. Thank you all very much for your questions and your participation, and have a great day.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.